counselor. And I'm coming at you guys today really excited. I have a special guest. Of course, this is a collaboration with Muslims Thrive, so definitely check out their Instagram as well. And I'm looking forward to having this conversation around, Ramadan and mental health, self-isolation, and all these things that we've been dealing with and coping with. And I'm hoping that all of you guys out there tuning in are doing okay and you're able to stay safe and you're at home and that your families are okay. And if not, then this is the right place to get that support that you all need in terms of like your mental health, and just having conversations I feel that can be really healing and helpful. I'm always very open to having like questions and answering them related to mental health. And so my special guest is tuning in and coming up, and I'm just gonna wait till he's here. Hey. Hi.
Sorry, I wanted you to finish your
my little intro thing. Thank you. So this is, of course, Ahmed Ali Akbar of the amazing See Something, Say Something podcast. And if you guys have not heard of him or checked out this podcast, you've been missing out, because it's freaking amazing. Absolutely such a big fan and love it. And I'm such a big fan of you. And thank you so much for coming on today.
You've been on the show. You've been a source for me. I'm a huge fan. So I'm
yes.
happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I know we met a couple of years ago when I was lucky enough to get on an episode and talk to you about mental health, and it was such a different time in our lives. But
and Camila Rashad, who I've also spoken to recently.
Yes.
BuzzFeed office. We were able to do it in person. I haven't done an in-person podcast interview for probably like 6 months now.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, just because I was already shifting to remote work anyway, and now it's like the whole industry has changed, so everyone's doing it remotely.
That's true. That's very true.
I mean, you can just do it off I just have people call me on their iPhone, basically.
Okay, yeah, so that's good. Like, you've been ahead of the curve, though. You've been doing it, so you're comfortable with it. It's all.
Yeah, I actually got very lucky with COVID, in the sense that I've been independent since like 2019, and it was really hard in the beginning. Like, I don't know if anyone has ever experienced like a freelance shift. It's really, really hard. Like, it's very but then around like November, I was like getting my groove. It took like 10 months. Practically. Obviously I was like working, but I had like ups and downs. I finally got used to it. So I finally figured out a rhythm where I was like recording from home, and I was also I bought some kettlebells so that I could work out.
Oh,
because
I like that.
I'm a very extroverted person, but leaving the house is for me because it's a lot of work. So I bought a kettlebell. Like, I started doing investing in home podcasting stuff. So like I had my home set up, ready to go.
Yeah, you were. Sounds like it was all ready and set up and really good.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful. I love that.
Clients remotely? Like, how do you?
Yeah. I've been seeing everybody remotely at this point. Like, I've been doing group therapy on Zoom. Been doing individuals on like the phone, on Zoom, through like other, like whatever ways to like see. And like, I have like an online platform that I'm a part of. So I've been seeing clients through there. So it's been moving along, and I've been doing online therapy already for a few years. So for me, the transition actually wasn't that strange. I know for a lot of people it was like very new, but I was able to like, because I was already doing it, it wasn't much new stuff for me. So I was lucky in that sense, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like I stopped going out earlier than most, like in early March. And by the time they did this, like called the shutdown, I was hadn't left the house for like 8 or 9 days. So it worked out. I'm curious, just like when you do group therapy, do you have any concerns about like Zoom? There's like
the confidentiality,
like the privacy elements must be kind of a little bit stressful, but I don't know how else you would do it, I guess.
Yeah, I think like, with obviously with Zoom, we're doing it through like the hospital, and they're like setting up, the more confidentiality, the HIPAA compliant form of Zoom, because there's like a couple of different, right? Like there's the free version, then there's the upgraded version and stuff like that. So they set it up for us. So we can only like do it through there. But there is a little bit of, like the patients too, like we have to explain it to them, like nobody else should be in the room when you're talking to us. Like it is a, it's your confidentiality, and of course the other members of the group, and kind of being able to respect the boundaries. But that's something that we can only set up and tell them. So
Yeah.
it's a little bit of a trust, it's a circle
Yeah.
of trust basically.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting because we've set up all these things that allow our lives to be so much easier, and we've given up our privacy to do it. But on the other hand, like people need the mental, it's challenging. It's definitely really challenging.
Absolutely. And I think, because especially during this time, there's been such an increase in people's, need for mental health treatment. So that's like the other side of it. So I guess like just, we're trying to do our best to provide
Yeah,
the services as much as we can.
right.
So tell me how have things been going with you, like with quarantine and with like, social distancing, like all this stuff. You talked a little bit about it, but like delving in a little bit more about like what the
So
experience has been.
why the light is so bright here? I thought I could. I was trying to make it so that I wasn't like blinding everybody, but I can't. That's why it took me a second because I was like, wow, this is very very bright. Hold on. I think so. Like I said, I was in New York in the beginning of March.
Mhm.
My wife is in medical school. My work is remote. We were thankfully our work been canceled in any way. Although my wife's medical school stuff has really been shifted a lot.
Right.
We made a very challenging decision in which to return to go to Michigan with my dad because he lives alone and he's a works in a hospital.
Right.
So even though there were many reasons to, and I think people have a lot of legitimate critiques of people leaving their homes.
Mhm.
I was as careful as possible. I did very minimal contact to get to a car, a rental car, and we
Right.
wiped it down. Like we'd already been isolated for 10 days, and then we
Right.
continued to isolate. We were in Michigan, and thankfully nobody got sick. But we were just worried about him because I didn't, almost everybody else in our life was living with somebody, and not to say that like there's a lot of people who are isolated and living by themselves, and I
Right.
those people, but he's like an at-risk population. He's been so healthy. He's healthier than I am, so I don't
Oh,
know what
that's
else.
well,
But I
that's
was
good.
just out for whatever reason. Uh,
Yeah.
and then my uncle's also here, and like I'm not somebody who exercises very often. I exercise, but I'm not like a fitness junkie. But like
Right.
for Ramadan, I was like working out all the time, and I've started cooking a lot because I've never had a time where I've had so many people who rely on me to cook. So I've been
Right.
main cook in the house. And then the last thing is I've been writing a lot. I haven't written very much in the last year
Huh.
for whatever reason. I do write, but I don't. My production has been kind of low. But this year, I don't know, something about this crisis made me really want to write more. So I have like I probably am going to publish in the next in a 2 month span. I'm probably going to publish 5 or 6 pieces.
Mhm.
I'm going to publish like one, and I'm going to do a bunch of podcasts. But I'm like doing those pieces because I think I'm moved by the moment. I think it's like an interesting moment. So
Yeah.
it's been
Yeah.
okay for me. I'm very blessed that my wife is usually out of the house for like 18 hours of the day studying, and now she's at home and my dad's at home. So
Yeah.
it's kind of positive for me. Nothing changed for me. I stay at home.
Yeah.
It kind of worked out.
Yeah. Sounds like it did. Sounds like it did. And I saw some of your lives where you're like cooking and
Right.
like stuff is going on. So, I see like, have you made something that's been like a real hit and people have been like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is
So I
so
cook
good.
so much. Like it's so funny when you
Yeah.
cook that as much as this. Like the aunties really know. Like moms know, and like dads who cook as well do know. But
Yeah.
like you just like want to make something that people like, and you do want to put some work into it, but
Right.
it's challenging. I did make on the second day of Ramadan. My
Yeah.
mom had a very particularly labor-intensive dish that everyone in the family has had, like
Mhm.
roast pulao, where you make like a broth from scratch out of meat and
Yeah.
then cook rice in it with like onions and spices. It takes like 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
I made that, and everyone really liked that.
Oh,
That was a big hit. My in-laws live about. I need to plug in my phone. Sorry, 1 second.
no, that's a
Uh, yeah. So my in-laws live about. This is something I should have done before I got in here. I thought I plugged it in.
that's okay.
Okay, I'll be good for a second. So my in-laws live about 45 minutes away, and we do like socially distant like food drop-offs.
Oh,
Uh,
that's nice. I like
we have a
that.
community here, like so we'll drop off food for them. They'll drop off food for us.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and interestingly, I'll tell you another thing that's interesting is my dad is very involved in the local mosque, and he hasn't fasted for the last year because of health reasons.
Right.
He would always go to like Taraweeh or Tarawih prayers, however you pronounce it, at the
Yeah.
mosque every single day, despite not fasting. And he told you could say the imam, but he's like the let's just say the imam to keep it simple.
Yeah.
The guy who leads the prayers, he was like, you should just do it from your home. And so now he's doing it from his home every day. And because I was like, his kids were like, for once we don't have to go to the mosque with dad every day of Ramadan. But instead they're like standing there helping him with the Zoom call for like an hour and a half throughout.
Oh my God.
It's kind of funny. But he does that every day. He exercises every day. Like everyone's kind of trying to check in on their mental and physical health as best as possible. But it's hard.
It is. I totally agree. Yeah. I think like, the impact of mental health and like physical health is it's sort of like twofold, and it's sort of like I think like staying at home and not being as like normal movement, obviously, right? Like exercise is still more purposeful, but there's like so much that's been taken away from our day in terms of just like being able to like go outside of our house, go to work, or like physically like going out into the world, and that aspect, like missing that and living like, I don't know, like it's so strange. It's so against our normal to be like in quarantine. Like even people that are homebodies, and I'm not, I'm like someone who's out all the time, and I thought I would have a really hard time. I haven't done as bad as I thought I would be. I thought I would be really, really done with it and like leave the house and be like, I just can't anymore. Um,
So
but
it was interesting that there were
yeah,
some articles about how people with like some don't take that you can correct me or it's anecdotal like there's some
sure.
articles about people who have anxiety and depression have sometimes taken better or had less of an impact. It doesn't feel as catastrophic for those folks because they've already experienced some of those things in their head. And for me,
Hmm.
I'm not somebody who has any like diagnosed mental illness, but I would say that I have a challenge with ADHD for sure, where like I
Hmm.
have a hard time. One of the hardest things for me is making the decision to leave the house. Even though I love other people and I
Yeah.
love out, like getting all the things arranged in my life to leave the house is
Hmm.
very challenging. It's not because I'm depressed. It's just the organizational, like I have to do this and this and this and this. And so one strange thing for me is that because that's been taken away from me,
Yeah.
that stress is actually out of my life. And my only stress is like
Hmm.
whether I am working or
Yeah.
I am cooking. Those are the two things that I need to make a decision to do, which kind of simplifies my life in some ways. And it,
Yeah.
there are days where I'm like, this is horrible, and I want to like go out and like all that. Thankfully, I'm like surrounded by people who love me and I enjoy it. So it is interesting how like people take differently to it, and it's teaching. I think teaching everybody a lot about themselves.
I really, yeah, I agree totally. And I think it's pretty interesting what you mentioned in the beginning about, people that are already have dealt with anxiety and depression and how they're actually doing okay. I totally agree with that because I actually work with really high risk population in the hospital where I work in the clinic. And so those patients who are like just right coming off of like hospitalizations after suicide attempts,
Mm-hmm.
and I am like taking these patients on, and I was like, oh my God, I don't know what this is going to look like for these patients. They actually did okay.
Hmm.
They actually have been doing, alhamdulillah, have been doing okay. And it's everyone else that has not been doing as well. It's more of my higher functioning, private practice patients that have been struggling more. with this.
Wow, very interesting
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
I
I know.
mean, life is the life out there. Life in here is stressful. Life out there is also stressful in different ways, and I think people react differently to the different stressors.
Mhm.
Like, I mean,
Yeah.
like what's really strange about this for me is like I haven't lived in a communal family environment so consistently day in day out for so
Yeah.
long. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like I
Yeah.
haven't, and thankfully, like in my house, everyone's very independent emotionally and physically. Everyone can take care of themselves. Everyone can, you know,
Yeah.
like it's a very healthy emotional state of this house is in.
Hmm.
It is interesting how it's a very different flow than like, for instance, like for me when I'm feeling down, I'm like I am gonna go out. I'm gonna do something new. I'm gonna do something fun. I'm gonna like see my friend, or I'm gonna like go shopping. I'm gonna go eat, or like
Yeah.
me and Slamo will go see a movie, or me and Slamo will go, whatever that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That is out, but it is interesting how there is like an emotional. I'm lucky, I think, that I have an emotional bedrock of like my dad and my wife and my uncle that like we are like we're there and we're talking and we're checking in and like that's also another mode of being in the world that a lot of us don't do anymore because we're like obsessed with our jobs and stuff.
Yes.
It's interesting. It's really, really interesting to see like the different adaptations people have to make.
Hmm. No, I totally agree because I used to like, we actually spend a lot less time with our families, even though we live with them, right? Like we're just like in and out. Like I said, like I would barely ever be home or I'm coming home after the entire day working and all of that. And so my interactions with my family were like a lot less. And
Mm-hmm.
there is definitely a lot more room to just be with each other. And it is a blessing that you're not when you're not alone. I mean, I have some of my clients and patients, they're alone, and it's a struggle. It's a struggle to be in that way. But I think it's pretty cool how people have all these like Zoom parties and things like
Oh, yeah.
that happening. And I'm like, that's like it's pretty cool actually how we as a like society we've found ways around not being able to leave our homes. Like we're making it work.
We're definitely making it work.
We're definitely making it work.
I have two things I want to say about that. One
Yes.
thing, you said the thing about how we are learning ways to be with each other. What's really interesting is, obviously I've spent a lot of time with my dad. I visit him quite often, but he's seeing my daily
Yeah.
ritual. And for instance, he's had this idea since I was a kid, which was true then, is that I'm very wasteful. Like I don't eat all my food. Like I let things like if it's not fresh, I eat all this stuff. But like I have like over the course of just him seeing me operate a kitchen, he's like, oh, actually, you actually care about waste a lot. Like we
Yeah.
have like a, so he's like unlearning things about me, and I'm also learning
Hmm.
about that he's very actually quite useful in the kitchen, even though he doesn't like cooking. He'll like do whatever you ask him to do. He'll chop. He'll like clean. So it's we have become a unit where like I plan and prep and do execute
Yeah.
most of the cooking. My dad sort of sets things up and gets groceries and does some cleaning. My uncle cleans. My wife kind of does all the above. So it's like it's a nice little environment. And then the second thing
Yeah.
is one thing that I did very early in quarantine was me and
Mhm.
my cousins decided to do a Saturday 1 p.m. Zoom call, and we've
Ah,
done it every since quarantine with between
that's
three and I would say 12 people. So like earlier today, I had my cousins on a Zoom call, and it's a very different way of engaging because we wouldn't typically do that. Although we do talk pretty often, like me and my cousins, we have a group chat that's practiced every day. Like we don't
yeah.
have a plan; we just turn it on. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
It's really kind of strange how like we didn't do that before.
Mhm.
And I hope we'll continue to do it because I really like it. I find it to be like one of my favorite. I look forward to it every week.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. It is really interesting because I have like a group of friends that I went to Columbia with for grad school, and we live all over the place. So there's like somebody in Pakistan, there's somebody in India, there's somebody in Texas, there's somebody in New York, there's somebody in Boston, and we have been doing these like Zoom like Saturday hangouts in the middle of the day, and or like play a game or whatever. And I'm like, why didn't we do this before? Like we all don't see each other. We don't live in the same city, and we have the chat, and which we're fairly like in it, and but we're like, why didn't we do this before? Like why didn't we think of this before? Like this is so obvious. Like, why wouldn't you do this?
Well, just like it's kind of just obviously we're very globalized and like but we
Mm-hmm.
also are very present in our own lives. Like we just are stuck in our routines, and like it's broken
Yeah.
these routines. And like I think when it's typically like, oh, let's do a Zoom call, everyone's like, I don't have time. What's the point? Like unless it's like for a birthday or something like that, like people don't.
Hmm.
So it is interesting to see like the way other things have filled it in. And I'll give you another
Yeah.
example of something that I do that's regular that is like strange to other people but works for me is that
Yeah.
like me and my cousins often play like we have a thing to do, which is video games. We have like video games that we like and we just like
Uh,
call each other and we're practically before this,
yeah.
before COVID-19, we were basically on the phone like twice or three times a week.
Oh.
Because we had a thing to do, you know what I mean? Um,
Yeah.
as a result, I think we are much more comfortable. Like when you compare all of our cousins, those of us who like play the games together, we're like happy to jump on a Zoom because we're so used
Okay.
to engaging in this like communal way. Whereas
Yeah.
who don't do Zoom as often or like they think of it like work or whatever. It's like kind of like a burden, but
Hmm.
it doesn't have to be a burden. It can be kind of
Yeah.
a positive thing too.
Hmm.
I feel like eventually people are going to be like, remember when we had to hang out during a Zoom? I never want to go back to that. I think we should take some lessons from it. I think there's a lot of good lessons from it.
I totally agree. There's definitely a lot of lessons to learn throughout all of this. And like you said, were saying earlier, like we're learning so much about ourselves throughout all of this. And, and I feel like, yeah, that is really true. Like just sort of seeing how we're responding to, these like stressors and this anxiety and how much it's impacting us. And I think, just kind of recognizing like what is the most important thing, right? And like right now, obviously, we're all isolating and we're all staying at home because our physical health is very important. Our life is important. Our families' lives are important. Like it maybe like it's a reminder. It's a pause, you know, and it's like what you make of it, right? Like you could spend this time being like a total mess and like be like every day is such a burden and I'm like really stressed out by it, and there'll be times, of course, where we'll still be stressed out by it. But I think again, right, coming back to um, being able to just look at it with like, gratitude and thankfulness,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's like something as simple as your health and that of your family, being able to kind of remind yourself that there's still positive things happening and that there is going to be an end to this. I know it doesn't seem like that right now because like who
Yeah,
knows how long this is going to go on, but
it might change, but we'll be
yeah,
able to. Society will resume for sure.
society will resume. Exactly, exactly. And I know that you met, so shifting gears just a little bit, you were kind of mentioning to me about like the interesting things that you've been reporting on, in terms of like, the things that have been going on around like the city, in New York particularly. So tell me a little bit about that stuff.
So there's like two or three pieces that I've worked on. The most recent one that just came out, which you can listen to, is a podcast episode about the burial crisis in New York City, not
Hmm.
just during COVID-19, but prior to COVID-19. In the
Oh,
context that like because land is so expensive, there's a massive Muslim population in New
yeah.
York City. Many Muslims have to be buried like 2 hours away from where they lived in New Jersey or Long Island, because also like for many Muslims there's this desire to be buried next to other Muslims. So it's incredibly expensive to do that in the city for everybody, but for Muslims in particular. And then also you have to consider that we don't have the luxury as Muslims of time. When somebody passes, we want to bury them very quickly, and it's
Right.
not exactly very easy to. You can obviously reserve a plot, but it's not very easy to quickly bury. So there's kind of a crisis of burial in New York City for Muslims. And then COVID-19 happened, and it exacerbated all the issues um,
Right.
that were already there. So, the New York Times reported that like one funeral home in Brooklyn did I think 20 to 30 during a usual month before COVID-19, which is
Yeah.
reasonable. It's one a day, and now they're looking at 15 a day. Um,
Wow.
some like we talked to Imam Khalid Latif, who
Yeah.
obviously a community leader locally. Um, in a young community, in a college community, so perhaps he doesn't deal with burial so much himself, but he's helped coordinate it, and he's in touch with those folks. We're seeing like the need for like refrigerated trailers because when you think about like one
Right.
funeral, 15 bodies in one day, that's not easy in
No.
the world, especially in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Very challenging. And we also spoke to Lena Freeby, who does housing development, about somehow gentrification has complicated and put a lot of pressure on communities of color. So that's something that I've been working on. Also, like we're like actually trying to talk to a funeral home, and I talked to several of them on the phone, but
Yeah.
they're so slammed. They're like, we're so busy, like we can't really sit down to talk for half an hour
Oh my God.
because it's so busy.
That's that's so sad,
It is very sad. It is very sad.
right?
Thankfully, there is some infrastructure, and people there are people working very hard on figuring out how to deal with this crisis. And the
Yeah.
second thing is I reported on the halal food industry, not just in New York, just nationally in the United States,
Okay.
how they adapted to COVID-19, which is like we're seeing restaurants, many of them shut down, many of them limit their hours, many of them
Right.
embrace social distancing, carry out only, take out only. Many of
Mm-hmm.
them are closing, and many of
Right.
them are also changing to, like during Ramadan in particular, the question is how are people being fed during Ramadan?
Yeah.
Uh, they are doing a lot of charitable giving, mutual aid. So like, there's a restaurant in Atlanta called Spring Greens that does a hashtag drive through iftar, and
Oh, wow.
on launch good, and from 6 to 8, anybody who comes can get a free plate.
That's
Um,
amazing.
yeah,
Yeah.
butcher shops are seeing a lot of traffic in halal butcher shops, but they're like, it's also a struggle because like they need to implement social distancing, and if like the governor announces everything's shutting down and like 100 people come to your, butcher shop, it's gonna
Yeah.
be, like you can't.
Yeah.
So those are two of the main things that I've been working on. That second one should hopefully be coming out in Food and Wine magazine next week. Well, the website rather, but it's still called Food and Wine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I've been tweeting a lot. Keep like calling out people on Twitter, and then like people write that for like a thing. Like I called out Mindy Kaling, called out Allison Roman.
Oh,
Uh,
wow. Did you get a response from Mindy?
no, I didn't get it. I wasn't like I
Yeah.
wouldn't say I was calling them out in the sense that I was saying these people are problematic and they
Oh,
should.
yeah. Yeah.
More, I'm saying like here's where I think there was a flaw in the way you represented Muslims for Mindy Kaling, and
Oh, okay. Was
uh,
it Never Have I Ever? Did you?
yeah.
Yeah. Where was the, now I'm trying to think because
So I love that show. I'm not saying I don't dislike
yeah,
it.
it was
Great
pretty
show.
good. Yeah.
Really good. So what they do, I think, is a lot of characters in that show are bigoted, which is okay because people
Yeah.
are bigoted in real life.
Right.
Like, some characters will say things that are anti-black. Some characters will say things that are homophobic.
Mm-hmm.
Some people will say things that are anti-immigrant.
Yes.
However, the show always has somebody of that background with a voice. So like if somebody says something homophobic, like the queer characters are going to say something.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
That's true.
but there's a moment in an episode where they go to I think it's a Ganesh puja
Right.
and there's at least 2 or 3 moments of like Islamophobic comments that are unchecked, and there's no Muslim characters to speak back. Obviously, they're not portraying this as a good thing, but
Right. Right.
it's good to have like a community voice speak back. So that was my problem with that show. There was no Muslim characters in it. If you're going to engage in Islamophobia, at least have a Muslim character in the show. And if it's too much, that's also okay. Like every show doesn't have to do everything. Like it's like,
Right.
and I think they will because they obviously like showed characters to be Islamophobic because I think it's a criticism of them.
Yes. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's a swing and a miss. They tried.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's true. I agree with you there that there should be some kind of response or some kind of engagement around it. I also thought like what my issue I think was, and some of the people that watched it from South Asian backgrounds, was it was just too cliched.
Yeah.
And so, but I think that's the thing with comedy and that type of show is that they exaggerate to get that kind of reaction. It's just sort of like the technique or the way that they do it, but it is a little bit annoying because you're like, no, this is so cliched. This is like so 50 years ago.
Tell me which cliche. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you. I also think there was things that were cliched about it, but I want to know what were the cliches that like rubbed you the wrong way.
Like,
Never,
yeah, I think it was just like, this idea of like the way the arranged marriage works still, the uncle coming in and saying, stuff to the mom about like, oh yeah, and then we need like a male chaperone or person, like these like little things, which I feel like are not, they might have been relevant at a time, but they're not really the way it works anymore.
like
And
gay apps. like,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it kind of was like the old school thing of like, here's the bio data printed out, but it's like
Right.
he would
Exactly.
probably like be able to like access his information on an app, like
Right.
instead of like him showing up and being like, oh, he's hot, like what the hell?
Yeah, exactly. Like, why wouldn't you see a picture? Like, everybody sees a picture and a something, or you like look up someone online and you're like, oh, this is their name, and then you
Right,
do a little bit of digging.
right.
So there were others too, but I think that was like one of the more annoying moments. Like, especially the uncle was so annoying. Although that actor, he's from Glee, and I loved him in Glee,
Yeah,
and but but yeah, his character was pretty annoying. But that was an interesting tangent that we went into. And I know you started talking about like the tweeting, and I know that you're like very like active on Twitter usually. I'm like not, I've never really gotten into that Twitter thing. I don't know, maybe I'm just not that like, I feel like you need to be like snappy and you need to have these things, and I don't know. I mean, I do it in terms of like therapy and with my patients all the time. Like, I'm always talking, like I'm talking all the time, but I don't know, for some reason it just never translated into tweets for me. So I don't know, tell me a little bit about how you got into Twitter, and like
yeah, sure.
what is it for you to like kind of engage in that platform?
So I've always been on the internet, so like it is maybe second nature to me. But I will say that I think everybody can benefit from not having a Twitter account, but having a platform that is good for what they do,
Right.
either as like as for professionally or in terms of their like life interests.
Yeah.
So like, often that involves finding your community. So for me, I was like just interested in finding like, I know this is gonna sound cliche now, and it is cliche now, but like maybe 8 years ago it wasn't cliche, but I was like a
Yeah.
weirdo brown kid, and I just wanted to find other weirdo brown Muslims. So like I was just like doing what I think is in my head and putting it out there and hoping
Yeah.
people respond to it and finding a community. And I did find a community. Like I would follow people on Tumblr that I found. I would find follow people on Twitter. I would like make things and they would promote it, and they like we would like all like engage with each other. And so like that might be a natural thing, but even for like therapy, I feel like I'm sure there's therapist communities, mental health communities, and you
Yeah.
can also like if you have something useful. I don't have any useful skills. If you provide something to people, that's also good. So like if you are a doctor or like a I don't know, data analyst or whatever. Like, there's lots
Yeah.
of useful things that people can get from you. And obviously, if you're like a photographer, you go to Instagram, you don't go to Twitter. Like, it depends on what you are. So, like, I'm not a good photographer. I like
Yeah.
have a lot of thoughts, and I like want to like community. So I just, that's why Twitter's good for me.
That's
But
your Twitter thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
but maybe it's not for you. I mean, that's fine.
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, but I just think it's just always really interesting because I feel like it's a different way to engage. I like Instagram. I think that's like because I've always liked taking pictures, or I like looking at pictures. So I kind of engage in that way. And so for me, I think that's why I gravitate more towards like Instagram. But
Well,
yeah, hmm?
you want to hear another interesting thing was the reason why Twitter is good for somebody like me is as somebody who is disorganized and has a hard time deciding to do things for a variety of reasons. It's very easy to make the decision to make a tweet, and it also fills that same feeling of writing, which is like my passion, but it's hard for me.
Right.
So it's like an easy way for me to like put out the things that
Yeah.
small versions of what I would like to do without as much like emotional stress as like actually having like a perfect thing that I submit and is published and all that. Like it helps me in that way. And you'll notice there's a lot of typos in my tweets because I'm trying not to put too much of my emotional stress into doing it. I'm trying to make it an easy thing for me. And
Yeah.
if it is hard for you, then I don't think it's probably for you. If you're feeling like, oh,
Hmm.
stressing
Yeah.
me out, I don't want people to respond to me. Like some people, for instance, when somebody responds to me, a lot of people like that drives them crazy. For me, it's fine. I don't care. I like it doesn't give me any emotional stress for somebody to respond to me. So if you're like somebody who
Yeah.
I'm not I'm not like an attention obsessed person, but I like to talk to people. If that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Saying things that are like kind of wild on Twitter, which they often will. I like to engage with people. Some people don't like that. People want a bubble. So
Hmm.
you have to find whatever is best for
No, that definitely, makes a lot of sense.
you.
Um, yeah, that it's like, it's something kind of like fun. It's like an outlet. It's just like a way of,
Yeah.
like you said, it's like short and like you put it out and it's a tweet, and
if you can avoid it, you should avoid it because it's not a lot of terrible things on there too.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. So it's
Can I ask you about what you're doing during this time? I don't feel like I got a clear enough idea of what you're doing during quarantine.
like me, like personally or like with work. Oh, okay. Like personally, I think it's just been I've been working a lot. I think because of like the increase in mental health needs, and I have a hard time saying no and creating boundaries when it comes to work. And right now there are no boundaries because I'm working from home and it's kind of all over the place. So I'm working a lot of hours, but I'm now feeling kind of burnt out a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm like right there on the edge. So now I feel like I need to kind of like dial back, and I've started dialing back just a little bit. Um, and like, like not taking on new patients, you know, and sort of just like focusing on what I'm doing and just being able to kind of keep up with that. So I feel like that's been like more of what's been happening. And then with Ramadan starting, I also wanted to dial back for that reason, to be able to kind of, focus on the spirituality of the month and being able to just be mindful and be present. One thing actually that's been really cool that I started doing is Jay Shetty. I don't know if you've heard of him, um, or I don't know if other people have heard of him, but he's podcast motivational speaker, and he has been doing like these uh, Instagram live meditations, and I've been actually tuning in every day to his meditations, and they are so good. They are so like peaceful, and they are just so calming, and like he's really good. He used to be a monk actually, and then he came back from being a monk. Yeah, and so it's like, okay, so now it's like, okay, he's legit. There's like a sense of legitimacy there, but he's like really great. Like I've heard his podcast and stuff like that. Like he's great stuff.
Make sure my phone didn't die.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No worries. No worries. Yeah.
Thing. It is charging. I just thought it might die on me real quick.
Okay.
A lot of people are going to Instagram Live to, I think, not only like as consumers, me and you, like watching like Dante Colley or like all these other people like dance or like do meditations, like that's a good way, but also as an outlet, like you
Yes.
said earlier that I've been Instagram living my cooking, like back in the like when I first started doing that before COVID, it was like a performance. It was like I have a cooking show. It was like kind of a joke. Like I'm gonna do a thing, but I just want to engage with people. Like I don't really care if like it's like super viral or successful. Like success matters less to me than like engaging with other people.
Yeah.
And I think like career-wise, everyone is like taking a sort of less capitalist mentality about it, and to be more useful with their work if they can.
Yeah.
So yeah. Also, hi Patrice, if you're still there. She said that she's an excellent
Yeah.
person.
Oh.
I was doing a lot of amazing reporting in New York Times.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. This has been, I think for me too, like I used to go out in the community and do a lot of events in the community. And so because of COVID, obviously that stopped. And so then I was like, okay, well then I need to do something because I can't not connect with people. I just like love connecting with people and like talking about mental health, talking about life. I love getting to know people. I'm like very much an extrovert. Like that's like a huge part of who I am. And so so this is kind of what I started to do was these like Instagram lives. And I started with Muslims Thrive, who I'm a board member of, and they're like a great organization, New York City. And we, help support mental health of Muslims. And I just started with them. I was like, listen guys, we are doing an Instagram live every day. And we're just going to like answer people's questions and give them like support during this time. Right. And so for myself, I also just started doing it like I'm doing it with you today, and I've done it in the past. Like did like a meditation with one friend, did like healthy lifestyle, healthy eating habits and stuff like that with another person. And so just kind of bringing out like experts or people that are interesting and talking about these things, just kind of having a conversation.
Right. What do you think? I mean, I think you and I have previously talked about the lack of let's say the I want to choose my words carefully, but
Yeah.
the challenges of mental health treatment within the Muslim community, where in some communities, you know, it is looked down upon or it's not seen as real, and in many cases, like all communities, I think one of the concerns is like worries about people being stuck at home in situations which are not, you know, could range from being negative emotionally to even all the way to being abusive. I mean, that goes for everybody, but you know, I'm
Sure.
wondering like what kind of outreach is possible in this time. Have you guys thought about that at all? Like, what are we doing to like make
Yeah.
sure people who might not typically be using mental health services to?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that is definitely a challenge, right? Like, because obviously with COVID, everything like about, staying at home and not being able to venture out and then being stuck in quarantine with potentially people that you have either abusive or toxic relationships with, and how it's just very, very challenging. And I've had questions here and there about that. And I feel like there are some, like, helplines that have been established, like, like New York City has tried to really establish some resources and outlets for people who need help and support. And so, and all therapy has gone online, so it's actually easier to engage in therapy now more than ever for anyone. And so that's one thing I would definitely tell people is, like, now is the time, because you don't have to physically go in anywhere. You can actually just get find somebody through your insurance. Like, it doesn't have to be that complicated, and just engage in therapy. And there's a lot of online platforms as well that are offering these services, and they're making it more like easier to engage and more approachable, and sort of the resources too, like the helpline, like with Muslims Thrive, we've put up a lot of the resources, and we've shared it on our website, we've shared it on Instagram and things like that. So we're constantly trying to do that, trying to see. Some of the hospitals have set up stuff for like the resources for their community. So there are things that are happening. I think it's just sometimes there is, like, people don't really know, like, it's not as easy to have knowledge of it. Like, you have to kind of like go look for it. It's not as easily accessible maybe as we would want it to be, but they're really trying to put that information out there. But what I would say to anybody like watching right now who might be struggling, I would say, like, do reach out. There is that like NYC hotline that has been set up, and that at the very least, calling them and asking them for additional resources or supports is, I think, just like the very first step that you can engage in. And if you can engage in therapy, find a therapist, then that's another thing that I would also recommend to people. But it is really hard.
Are
Again,
there
I have to come back to that. Yeah.
are there digital platforms like where you can text somebody as opposed to talk if you're in a situation where you can't talk about who you're in the house with?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think with the online platform that I'm a part of, Talkspace,
Mm,
it's texting. It has texting. You can leave voice notes. You can text. You can leave a video. You can do video calls on that, or you could just have like a texting app. So it's very much a possibility to engage in that. And there's other platforms as well, but Talkspace is the one that I've been working with for a couple of years now, and I think that it's really great.
right, right.
Yeah.
Very interesting stuff. I mean,
Yeah, I
COVID,
know.
COVID is really
I know.
feels
So
about the strengths and weaknesses of our different, you know, jobs, our economy, all sorts of stuff.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. I've really enjoyed talking to you as well, as always.
Yeah, really
Um,
conversations.
I know, we do. I feel like this has been really fun and really great, and
And
I love.
can I also just say that we did a piece? I did a piece in Self magazine where Bisma is featured. So if
Yes.
you haven't read that yet, it's kind of like some tips to get through a quarantined COVID-19 Ramadan, the mental health tips, physical health
Hmm.
tips. Bisma and some other mental health experts and some fitness experts kind of helped me understand some of the ways in which we can make the most of an unusual situation. And it's a really good, really, really helpful piece, even for me to write. I feel like
Hmm.
I talked to with you, and with some other people in that piece, like Camila Rashad and
Yeah.
Baz, and a couple of other people like really helped me make this work for me.
Yeah. I'm wondering if, do you have the link for it in any chance?
I was just tweeting about our stream here, which is why you might have seen me look to the side at one point.
No, that's,
Let me see if I can put it in the chat real quick.
yeah. I know somebody was asking about the conversation, and so I just pinned that, and then I was like, if you send that, then we can do that.
You know, uh, there's a lot of the other thing that you can look at if you want to like sort of see where you and I are coming from. Is there's an episode that you and I did on the
Yeah.
Say Something podcast, which is like it's like episode 18 or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
where we talk about a lot of the different challenges of mental health treatment in the Muslim community. I just posted the Twitter link, but I'm gonna actually post the self link.
Yeah, but that's really great. Yes, absolutely. I feel like this is a conversation that needs to keep happening, honestly, because we have made strides in the Muslim community in terms of talking about mental health, but we are by no means are we there yet.
Right.
There is still so much stigma that's attached to this. There is so much like misunderstanding of what therapy really means. There is like this fear of taking medication and like how that can be helpful. There's like, um, there's just like, oh, I don't have a serious problem. Oh, I'm not crazy. These are still actually misconceptions that people are having. And so I feel like that's sort of where my drive and motivation comes from a lot of the time, is just like being able to provide information, just being able to like frame it in a way, change your perspective, be open to talking about it. You don't have to, it doesn't mean that you have to just go start therapy right now or go start taking medication. It's just being able to acknowledge your experience. And right now, especially, we are all in this together, you know? It's like, not that I'm a professional here, but I'm also struggling with anxiety about going outside and being potentially exposed. I'm having trouble sleeping. All of my clients, all my patients, everybody's talking about trouble sleeping. I'm having trouble sleeping. I'm like, I took a melatonin yesterday. It really helped me. Maybe you should try to take a melatonin. So we are like, like we're in this all together. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
And I'm being very real with them, because I'm always very like, I try to be very authentic with my patients. I'm very real with them. I'm like, listen, this is hard, that we're all struggling, and I know that sleep is a problem, and like sometimes I'm struggling with it too, like just like showing like
Right.
I know I'm the expert, but I'm also not perfect, and I'm also human, and I'm also just trying to deal with it. And yeah,
Sleep until after Fajr. I sleep from like
yeah.
5 until 10 or something like that.
Wow.
5 until 11 if I'm lucky, or 12 if I'm really lucky.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a very challenging time.
I know.
And I think we're all being open with each other, which I think is good. I mean, like, I think there
Yeah.
is like a level in which mental health conversations are coming more to the conversations. Hey, Spring Greens just joined the chat, and that's the person I mentioned earlier, who I did some reporting on for that piece.
Oh, very
They're,
cool.
they're doing a launch good, where if you go to their page, which you can just see there, they are fundraising for free, like 250, 500 meals, depending on the night, of iftar from 6 to 8 p.m.
Oh, I love
So,
that.
yeah, yeah,
That's beautiful.
yeah.
Thank you.
Anyhow, so it's yeah, I feel like we're all being more generous around mental health with each other, which is hopefully that'll continue to be the case.
I
Um,
know.
but
Same here. I know. So thank you so much for joining me today, Emma. And I look forward to collaborating and talking to you more in the future. Um, you know, and this,
yeah, I'm so
yeah,
glad for the work you're doing as well.
yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
All
Yeah.
right, thanks for
All
having me.
right. Take
Bye.
care.
Ramadan
All right. Bye,
Mubarak.
everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.
All right. Bye.